Thank you so much for listening to Breadwinning Mums. We really appreciate your continued support over the last year, and we're happy to announce that we have published the Breadwinning Mums book. Yay! This book is based on the conversations from the Breadwinning Mums Season 1 episodes. It highlights the candid journeys of each mums, as well as a golden nugget of wisdom from their life's lessons. Now is the perfect time to give the gift of the Breadwinning Mums book to the special mums in your life or to yourself. No matter where you are in life, I'm sure the practical tips within the Breadwinning Mums book will help you take your lives just a little bit further. Limited copies available, so order yours now at breadwinningmums.com. That's breadwinningmums.com. Coming up next on the Breadwinning Mums.
It is not the end. It's part of your journey. But don't be searching for a silver bullet. Just take each piece of advice, each new tool, just add it to the toolbox and just keep building. You will get out of it, and it won't be as far away as it feels. You will get out of it, but don't pin all your hopes on one thing fixing it. Just really use everything that comes along, and do reach out. Do reach out and ask for that help.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Breadwinning Mums podcast. This is a place where we debunk the myths of working mums, cheer each other on, and show the world that it's okay to be a mum and still pursue excellence in your chosen area of expertise. Today we're chatting with Carly Hopgood, a certified professional coach and the co-founder of Sajer Group. Carly shared her life story about growing up in different parts of the world, building her roots in Sydney before making a sea change with her family to New Zealand, and overcoming post-natal depression. Here we go with Carly Hopgood. Hello, Carly.
Hi, Jane.
How are you?
Good. Excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for reaching out. Really love what you're doing. But before we go into that, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, where you started from and how you came to be where you are?
Sure. I was originally born in Australia, but we left Australia when I was just a baby. And I didn't actually return to Australia till I was a teenager. So I lived in Texas on the Gulf of Mexico and learnt to speak with an American drawl. And then moved to Hong Kong, where I lived for 3 years. And then moved to Tokyo for another 3 years. And then moved back to Australia as a teenager, and then went to boarding school in Sydney.
Wow.
So I've been in Sydney more than anywhere else throughout my life, but I have been to a lot of different countries. And essentially I trained as an engineer, have had a career, am still in a career about being an engineer, and met my husband, got married, had a couple of kids. And when my second son, who is now 9, so my kids at the moment are 9 and 11, my boys, but when he was about 18 months old or so, had a bit of an epiphany because we were living on the outskirts of Sydney with a large mortgage and hour and quarter commute each way for both of us. We were sort of ships in the night, one doing the morning shift, one doing the evening shift. And we never really saw our kids. Sort of had this epiphany of, I don't want to, this is not life, this is too much of a rat race. This is not what we signed up for. So back in 2016, we decided that we would do a sea change. And we would move to a more, something that would work better for our family. So we'd move towards grandparents. And my parents live in Coffs Harbour, and my husband's parents live in Hawke's Bay in New Zealand. Now, what most of the listeners probably won't know, but some might, is that in 2016 in Hawke's Bay, there's a village called Havelock North. And what happened in 2016 was there was a big water contamination incident where people died, and a third of the town actually got really sick with Campylobacter from the water supply.
Wow.
And we're both, my husband and I are water engineers, so we had no trouble getting jobs. So that made up the decision as to which grandparents we were going to, and we moved to New Zealand back in early 2017. And I'm still here in New Zealand, so sometimes my accent is confused. As to whether it's an Aussie or a Kiwi one.
Yeah.
So we've been here for 7 and a bit years, and living a very different lifestyle. So, our commute to work is about 12 minutes on a bad day. And it's quite a different balance. And we're walking distance to good schools, and the kids can kind of play in the streets, and it's a little bit more old school in that regard. And so, I guess in some ways, technically, we're living the dream. But it's never, things never are that simple, really, are they? And so, yes, we have a, great life. Our mortgage, is tiny, and we've got a great house and all that kind of stuff. But that doesn't mean that everything goes smoothly. We haven't, and I guess people kind of have this dream of sea changes being this amazing thing that's going to mean that life's just going to be easy. And what I would say from the other side of that sea change is that that's not true. So I don't think in our 15 years of being together, more than that now, 18 years of being together, that my husband and I have had more than, 6 months or a year where we haven't had some kind of life-changing thing that's really full on. Whether it's buying a house or selling a house or moving country or having kids or having miscarriages or having having kids start school, which people don't realize is actually really full on for quite some time, having them start school. And then, or whether it's medical diagnoses in the kids or yourself or, other things like that. Or we've had a lot of extended family issues as well. And then, of course, you chuck in to the mix with the COVID lockdowns, the various things that happened there. The New Zealand lockdowns were a little bit different than a lot of the Aussie lockdowns. But on top of that, my family and a lot of my husband's family were actually in Australia, so we couldn't see them for extended period of time. We then went to see them, and then we got locked out of New Zealand and we couldn't get back. And then we finally got a place to go through the quarantine system, which was next level, really hard with a really hyperactive boys in tiny hotel rooms for 10 days. But on top of that, before we even got to that, I was almost not allowed back in the country. We had immigration issues because I was Australian and I wasn't eligible to apply for New Zealand citizenship yet at that stage. And I didn't have a visa because we don't need visas, but when they shut the borders, we do. And there was, so then I wasn't allowed home, and there was all kinds of, there's just always, I guess the moral of that part of the story is just, there's always something else. And that's what's really led me to this position that I have on work-life balance. I hear a lot of people, a lot of my clients talk about work-life balance. And I just don't believe that it exists. And I should probably give a little bit of background as to what I mean by my clients and things. So all that time that I've been talking about, I've been a mother. I've also been working as an engineer. I worked full-time from 6 months old from my first one, and my husband took some time off and was the stay-at-home dad. Then then we switched around with the second one, and I was the stay-at-home for a bit longer. And then I started up a business, and then I also got a job and was running businesses. So I've run a few businesses over the years that one of them was particularly successful, but then COVID decided to have fun with that one, and I just wasn't in the right headspace to pivot at the time. So I shut it down. And so I've been working full-time for the last 2.5 years, and my husband's been working part-time and running the household, which is quite a different approach. But I've recently moved to myself working part-time at my engineering role and part-time starting up my business again. And
Is this the same business that he had before COVID?
it's a variation of it.
Okay.
I've definitely, I think the world has shifted since pre-COVID. And so this is the extension of what it would have turned into if I could have pivoted and could have kept my mojo going. But I think a lot of us got quite deflated through the whole COVID thing, and it was quite hard work. So my current business is a business called Sajer Group, and it's where we help you live the life that you love. And it's helping professional women to design and live a life that's actually really vibrant, where they actually are flourishing. And so it's the opposite of work-life balance in some ways, because when we're talking about having work-life balance, what we often end up meaning is we just want an absence of things. We want an absence of overwhelm. We want an absence of that feeling of guilt. We want an absence of not feeling like we're ever enough, So we're actually after these feelings of wanting to feel like we're enough, wanting to feel like things aren't out of control, wanting to feel like we're actually enjoying life. And I find that when I do talk with a lot of my clients who I coach, and also who I do through my group coaching programs and things, when I speak to them, they're not actually after work-life balance. They're after these other feelings, these feelings of enjoying life and flourishing in life, and not just feeling so overwhelmed and so out of control. And also just so like they're not good enough at work, and they're not doing enough at home, and they're missing too much at home, or they're, that real juggle. And I feel that by us chasing this concept of work-life balance that doesn't actually exist, we're putting a lot of energy in the wrong areas, because we're putting a lot of energy into, oh, if I just did this sea change, everything would be better. Or, oh, if I just started working part-time, everything would be better. And I think the clincher for me in coming to that conclusion was, I said my husband's been working part-time for the last 2 years. And even only 3 or 4 months ago, I had a conversation with him, and he just said, I just don't have any time to do things for myself, to go, hang out with friends, or be able to work on my fitness or anything. And I'm thinking, you don't have a long commute. You don't have a huge mortgage. You work 25 hours a week. If you don't have enough time, it just doesn't exist, and it really is about priorities with whatever time we do have, and about what we focus on and what we put energy into. That's so much more what makes the difference as to whether we're enjoying and flourishing in life, rather than whether we have the right balance of work hours versus hours at home. So that's a lot of what I'm out there doing, trying to relaunch this business, trying to help people understand that the life they love doesn't necessarily have the right ratio of work hours to home hours. It's actually about what's going on between their two ears. It's actually about how we're experiencing life as opposed to getting the right external setup.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of where I'm sort of trying to help women learn from my experience, because the thing I often listen to podcasts, including your one. I love your one, and it reminds me, especially with the mums of kids that are younger, it reminds me of what I was like when I was younger, in that regard. And it doesn't, I, I would love to say to mums who have young kids that it gets easier. But I'm going to have to say the same thing that people said to me at the time, and I hated them for. And that is, it's just different.
Yeah.
It's, you don't have to wipe as many bums, and you don't have to, run around cleaning up food off the floor that they've thrown on the floor in a tantrum. But you have to put a lot more thought into the psychology.
Yeah.
Things like cybersecurity. Puberty's hitting earlier these days, like so much earlier. Things are so much more complicated when they're hitting puberty in the age of the internet, when all this information is there, even though we restrict our kids and we restrict the hours they spend in front of screens and stuff, we don't let them do that much of it. But even with the little bit that we do, that's a really complicated space. And so I would encourage mums, whenever I hear mums say, oh, but when they reach school, it'll be better. Or, oh, but when they get to the school term, it'll be better. Or, oh, but when they get to this age and they can be reasoned with, it'll be better. No, it will just be different. They'll just be.
It's the same with the sea change that you were talking about. We're always constantly chasing this non-existent enigma that we think will finally give us the peace that we are looking for. But at the end of the day, like the amazing Dr. Gabor Mate said, life is not what happened with you, it's what happened to you.
That's exactly
during the experience, right?
Yeah. It's the experience of how you choose to interpret every experience that you have, because we do constantly fall into the trap of thinking that our external circumstances are going to make the difference. Even if those are just the external circumstances of, my kids will be older, so they'll be easier. It doesn't happen. There's always ends up being some kind of challenge. And you'll find, especially when you have multiple kids, that the challenges won't be the same between the kids. My two boys are very, very different. And my older boy is just this gentle, old, beautiful soul, who also has so many struggles. Like, he has every kind of learning difficulty and physical difficulty, or whatever that you've got in the book, all those comorbidities that go together, all those letters. He's got lots of them. And so he finds life challenging in so many ways. Whereas my second son, I often say everything he touches turns to gold. Like, he's in the top reading, he's in the top maths class, he's the most the most coordinated, talented football player, tennis player, anything he tries. He's popular, he's the leader, all the rest of it. And I have to not only parent them very differently, but I actually also have to explain to them why I'm parenting them very differently. Because now they're at an age, and this is what gets harder as you get older, as they get older, is I now have to explain to them, to the 9-year-old, why I expect him to do more than the 11-year-old. Not even than he did when he was 9. I expect him to do more than the 11-year-old now. And that I will always expect more from him. And he says, that's so unfair. And I'm like, yes, you are correct. It is unfair if you look at the total amount I'm expecting you to do. But actually, what I'm expecting from you is that I'm pushing you and growing you. and you're being pushed and growing just as much as I'm pushing and growing your brother. It's just that I don't have to push very far for him, you know. And I think my 9-year-old is sort of starting to grasp the idea, but he doesn't really.
Yeah.
And it is just a constant struggle to try and help him understand. And he gets quite upset sometimes because he sort of says, oh, my brother should be teaching me this. I shouldn't be teaching him. He's my older brother. Why, you know,
Yeah.
why am I the one figuring all this out and telling him? And it's,
Yeah.
yeah. So there's always seems to be another challenge.
Yeah.
And so really actually enjoying and living a vibrant life is not about an absence of external challenges, because the
Mm.
moment you're a mum, you're always a mum. And the challenges just keep changing
Yeah.
and coming in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Even when you're a grandparent, right?
This is what I'm told.
Your adult child still needs you in different forms.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Carly, for taking us through the journey of your life. I want to go back to the really young Carly. Before you started your international adventure, what took you overseas? Was it one of your parents' work?
Both, but yeah. So we mainly in the end followed Dad's career. He was with Dow Chemical, one of the large, you know, petrochemical companies and all that kind of stuff. But Mum also was a geophysicist with Shell and things. So we just, it was living the expat life around the way. And then my parents made the decision. It would have been in there around when they were around, or their late 30s, early 40s, they would have made the decision that they wanted my brother and I to go to high school in Australia so that we were Australian.
Yeah.
And so they moved back. They went from that high flying kind of expat life to, they bought a mushroom farm in a place called Woolgoolga on the north coast of New South Wales, near Coffs Harbour. So we went from Tokyo to a small country town of Woolgoolga, where I went to school, and some of the kids had never been more than 50 kilometers away. And I turned up with this international school accent, sounding really weird. I didn't know who Kylie Mole was, didn't know any of, you know, these things that were on the TV, and had to learn. I remember standing in front of the mirror and trying to teach myself an Australian accent. And I think I managed to get an Australian accent within about 3 weeks, because I was in this small country town just for 1 year. But I was in this school in this small country town for a year. And it was, you know, when you're 11, 10, 11, you care about what people say. And so I put a lot of effort in there to learn this before I then went off to boarding school. So
yeah. How was it like for you to travel around the world as a young kid, though? Did you like it because that meant that you get to stay with your parents, or did you hate it because that meant that you had to constantly change friends?
So I get asked that, and the reality is I didn't know any different. So as an adult, looking back, I'm really glad that I did it. And I think it made me a lot more versatile in terms of being able to make friends, and also to realize that, you know, friends can be for a season. You can have friends while you're there, and really genuinely care about each other and really love each other. And yet time moves on and you don't keep in contact, and that's actually okay. You know, they were there for the season when you needed them.
And you have the resilience to establish new friendship for when you move to the new place. Okay.
Yeah,
great.
So, and but I also really loved seeing that life could be so many different ways, and the idea of normal could be so different. So I think it gave me a really good sense of always just double checking the lens through which I was interpreting things. I think it helped me to be able to not make assumptions that everyone would see things the same way that I did. And it meant that as an adult, when I moved to different countries, that I was able to adapt, I think, more quickly. In some ways, the country that I had the most trouble adapting to, so as an adult, I also moved to Canada and Tanzania. But the country that I probably had the most trouble adapting to was New Zealand, which sounds really
Why?
odd.
As an adult, though.
Yeah,
As
so
an
this was
adult, yeah.
7 years ago. Yeah.
Mm.
So it was hard because of the kids, but it was also that I think I assumed that the cultures were the
Yep.
same, and
Yep.
they're not. They are
Yep.
quite different.
From Australia, you meant?
Yes, Australia and New
Oh.
Zealand, the culture is more different than you would think.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, so that was
What
a
are the
real
biggest
eye-opener.
differences?
So one of the biggest differences that definitely works out in a life and career space is in Australia, if you can pay someone to do something at a decent rate, you pay them. Like if you can get a decent rate for a cleaner, oh my goodness, you get that cleaner.
Mm.
In New Zealand, there's an attitude of, if I can do it myself, why would I pay someone else to do it? So there's a real DIY culture in New
Mm.
Zealand.
Mm.
And so it does mean that a lot of businesses that work in an Australian context just don't work in a New Zealand context because people won't pay for services that they
Yep.
will be able to do themselves. But it also means that people don't value time as much. They would rather use their time looking after everything in their house and all the rest of it rather than pay someone to do it.
Yep.
So and that does also work out in how overworked Kiwi mums often appear. So when I talk to Kiwi mums, I'm often like, well, would you consider getting a cleaner? And it's kind of like, it's they look at me like I've got two heads, but it's slowly shifting. It's becoming a bit more acceptable to do that kind of thing. But there is this sense of overwhelm for Kiwi mums is particularly big because there's quite an attitude of, I don't pay someone to do something that you can do yourself.
Mm.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Mm.
I want to go back to that young Carly again.
So,
Did you know that you're going to be a career woman or a mum or both?
I always wanted to have the option of having kids, and I always knew that I probably wanted to have them. I was never one of those teenage girls that babysat because I was at boarding school, but also because I wasn't one of those teenage girls that loved looking after babies or anything like that. I always thought babies smelt and were loud. And, I'm better with babies now that I've had my own, but up until I had my own, like I'd be like,
Yeah.
oh, I think I'd changed one nappy and went, well, and why would anyone do that? That was, and I didn't have my first child till I was 33 or 4 or something. So, until I was in my 30s, I was, yeah. So I can definitively say that when they're your own child, it's different.
Yeah.
And you'll do all kinds of things that you never dreamed you would do, including standing there when your sons are in the shower together when they're young, like they were, I don't know, 5 and 3, and you're standing there going, "Stop pulling your brother's penis!" Like, and the things that come out of your mouth, you're just like, what was I thinking that having these kids? Like, I never thought that sentence would come
Too
out
late
of my
now.
mouth. Like I know. So they, yeah. So but I always knew I wanted to work.
Yeah.
And I've always, I did really well at school. I always put a lot of effort into work academically, and then through engineering I did as well. I don't think I necessarily knew what I wanted to do and what it was that I enjoyed. I just did the engineering because I, went to a private school on the North Shore in Sydney, and you got to go to university, and I was good at maths and science. I could do it without having to put much effort in. So, okay, let's do engineering because we can get a job at the end and see what happens. And and so where I've actually ended up in my engineering career is not necessarily 100% what people would call an engineering, space, because I was too bored by by the engineering. Because what I've actually discovered as I've gone through this journey of, well, what do I want to do when I grow up, is I've really discovered that what I love is the joy of creation.
Mm.
And it doesn't matter to a certain extent what I'm creating. I might be creating videos. I'm also an artist, so I often create paintings or drawings and things. But then it can also even be a PowerPoint presentation. I love that creation process.
Hmm.
Not so much the word side of it, tends to be more a visual thing for me, but I I run a whole lot of workshops as well, face-to-face workshops as well as online workshops, and even getting teams working together and the team creating something. Actually creating the workshop to get the team creating something gets me excited as well.
Interesting. Yeah.
Um,
When
and
did you notice this? What age were you?
I reckon I was probably about 40. I was very late to the show in figuring out what I wanted to do when I grew up. I think in my 20s, I was so focused on, traveling the world, but also just getting my engineering career going because that's what you did. In my 30s, I was, focused on having the kids. I had them at 33 and 35, I think, something like that. And getting them happening. And then we moved country and whatever. And it was actually only once we did the sea change and settled that I had the headspace to start thinking, oh, wait a second, because we also had in there, we had a few retrenchments because of things changing. And I took a voluntary redundancy. And there was just, there was all these things that made me go, oh, these stop points that made me
Yep.
go, oh, wait a second.
Yep. You tick a few boxes along the way, and now what about me?
Yeah, what actually turns me on for a job in that
Yep.
way. And so it's been a long process, and I've avidly researched and digested loads of the neuroscience behind it all, but also all these different tools that people, because there's a plethora of tools on the internet about how to do these types of things, and I think I've done most of them, to try and figure it out. And it just keeps coming through in these same themes of what I get super excited about is creating something new.
Yep, I love that. And I want to go back to that because I wanted to ask you about your creation through Indigo Studios. But before we go into that, how was your motherhood journey? Was it hard for you and your husband to decide that finally you want to grow your family and you want to start trying?
So we always knew. So I knew once I'd met and married my husband that we would have kids. We did have someone advise us. So it took a while to we were together for 4 or 5 years before we got married. And I was at the stage that I was like, right, I'm ready to have kids. Let's just have kids. And he was like, no, 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 we have to get married first. And I was like, okay, fine. So let's get married and then let's just straight have it start having kids. And I remember someone saying to me, and it was very wise advice of, just stop after the wedding, enjoy the first 6 to 12 months, don't get pregnant straight away, just enjoy the time, and because it's the last time that you'll have it and it'll be totally different after that, so just really enjoy it. And so we did, so we were married for, I don't know, 18 months or more before the first kid was born. And I'm glad that we did, because I didn't have any complications in my pregnancy or particularly in my births. I didn't, it was pretty textbook, which was wonderful, like that. It was great. But I don't think that I was necessarily the easiest to live with when, when I was pregnant. There is a story that gets told again and again that I used to occasionally yell at the toaster because it made too much noise when it popped up. Like I was just
Blame it
not
on the
totally.
hormones. That's what they're there for.
That's right. I was a mess hormonally. Because I just didn't. The second time I wasn't, because I knew what I was doing, but the first time I was like, what
Yeah.
the heck is going on?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
with this body. And my first one was a whiz of a baby, like, as in he was so easy. He slept, he was he's sleeping through the rest of his life at the moment still, but and so I thought, we've got this all down pat. And then the second one, being the superstar go-getter that he is, came out screaming and didn't stop for the first year. Apparently,
Oh,
I
no.
don't actually remember the first year of
Yeah,
his
yeah,
life.
yeah. It's like
So
PTSD. You block it out.
I did.
From
I
your
definitely have.
memory.
Well, I think I just didn't get enough sleep because he wouldn't sleep with anyone else. No one else could settle him, and he never slept for more than an hour and a half for the first 6 months. I actually didn't sleep enough to encode memories. So I genuinely have no memories of 2015. So people talk about something, a world event that happened, and I'm like, what? And then I'm like, it happened in 2015, didn't it? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, yep. That's why I have no idea what you're talking about, because I just didn't encode enough memories. So I did end up with postnatal
Yep.
depression at that time and stuff. No
How long did it
surprises.
last for?
So I ended up treating it, and when did I go? So I kept going on the medication through the sea change because I thought that's going to be a big change. I
Mm.
felt like
So
I
hold
was
on, when
probably
did you
fine.
first notice that you had
Oh,
postnatal?
postnatal. Oh. It would have been, it was in the dark period that I can't remember. So my mum was very onto it. And
Mm.
my mum just went, no, you've got this is not right.
She
You're
noticed,
not,
yeah.
you're not good. So she made me go to the doctor. So it was sometime in that first year
Mm.
I started on some medication, and I kept it going for at least a year or two through the change. I kept it going longer than I probably felt that I had to, but uh, I wanted to be sure I didn't spiral down, especially because by the time I'd moved to New Zealand as well, my mum's back in Australia and we still talk most days or whatever. But um, I knew that I could mask it from her over the phone more, whereas if
Yeah.
she's there, I can't. So, yeah, but I haven't had any recurrences since then,
Yeah.
since the postnatal. I have done a lot of CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy, and a lot of work in that space to make sure that I don't go back down that path. But
How did it feel? Like for those moms who have just given birth and
yeah,
maybe right in the middle of it, but not knowing,
yeah.
how would you know?
So it just felt super dark and heavy is how I would say it. And it just felt like it was never going to end.
Mm.
This was my existence forever. And people would say to me, it will change. It is going to end. And I'd just be like, when? Like it does not feel like this is ever going to end. It just feels like I'm on this cycle of screaming baby, calm baby, scream baby, feed him, calm him, like he just and just this dread, like this. I would have a physiological response when the baby cried, not
Mm.
just your milk being let down and stuff, but I used to have this like tense up, like the cortisol in my
Yeah.
body would have just been going crazy at
Yeah.
that time, because I'd just be like, oh, not again,
Yeah. The
um
fight, flight.
oh, so badly.
Yeah.
And you're up in the middle of the night, like, but in the middle of the night felt the same as in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
There was kind of no,
Yeah.
it was
Everything
all
sort
the
of meshed
same.
into one. Yeah. Because you're
Yeah.
living on what, 1 hour nap if
Yeah.
he doesn't
Yeah.
sleep. Mm.
Yeah. And so you just can't see any light in anything, and you can't, and people say it's going to get better, and you're just like, well, I can't see that. And
Yeah.
so you just don't have any form of compelling future, and you just don't have anything that you're looking forward to, and everything feels heavy and dark. And in particular, I find with women that I've talked with who have had similar things, it seems to not, it's not worse necessarily, but it's even harder if you have more than one kid. Like,
Yeah.
so it's
Because you're still looking after the older
because you're
one.
looking after the older other one.
Mm.
Um, and so then you have this added guilt of the fact that you feel like you're not looking
Yeah.
after the other one. So it's still horrible and hard work with the first. Like, it really is hard work with the first because it's such an adjustment,
Mm.
because you were an autonomous being before.
Mm.
You were able to be the master of your own destiny, and all of a sudden you have no control over anything that's going on.
Mm.
And you try and put them into nap routines, and they don't go into the nap routines, and then you feel like you're crap for not putting them in the nap routines. And at the time, you feel like this is just the hardest thing you've ever done.
Mm.
And it's one of the biggest changes that you'll ever make, but it's not the hardest thing you'll ever do, because there's so many more challenges that come through motherhood. But so that you don't lose hope, you're better equipped to do it later on. Like,
Yeah.
after that initial change of
Yeah.
transformation from just a single entity
Yeah.
into mum,
Yeah.
it,
And
it
being
gets easier.
stretched, like
And
physically and metaphorically.
that's exactly it.
Yeah.
You don't ever kind of go back. So then you're so
Yeah.
much more resilient, so much more able to do things and jump into the new challenge so much better.
Yeah.
To the point that I often say I recruit a lot of people through my engineering work, and I'm often trying to advocate for the fact that, hey, the mums who want to work have actually grown. Like, even if they can only work part-time, they're actually going to give you more in that part-time because they're going to be
Yeah.
more resilient, they're going to be more focused, but they're
A
also
lot more
going to be more
efficient.
able, and they're going to be more able to adapt to what you need, and they're going to be more aware of what you need, not what they think that,
Yeah.
because they've grown that muscle of responding to another human being that non-mums haven't. And I think that's something that, it's going to be a generational battle, a battle for our whole generation, but I think it's something that we really need to push. There is something fundamentally different
Yep.
in how I am as a worker now in comparison to what I was in my 20s.
Yep.
And I think I'm a much more valuable worker now than I
Mm.
was in my 20s to
Hear,
society.
hear.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah.
And so, when did you finally, or how did you finally decide that you're good to stop the medication and that you're able to live on your own terms?
I really felt, well, so I'd done a lot of working through a lot of issues and CBT, and recognizing a lot of my thoughts that were and therefore what I was focusing on, because what you think about is what you then focus on and then what you experience. So I'd done a lot of work on trying to retrain a lot of those thoughts, or recognize when they were happening anyway. And I have done a lot of meditation over the years in
Mm.
different forms and to differing levels of regularity. So I first learned to meditate under a ex-Buddhist monk back in like 2005 or 6 or
Mm.
something, like a long time ago, because I just always try new funky things. Mindfulness wasn't a thing back then, but I
Yep.
first learned to meditate then. Uh, and yeah, and so I've done all kinds of different types of meditation through the years, and sometimes I'll go for a month without meditating, and sometimes I do it every day. The thing that a lot of the neuroscience is showing at the moment is that meditation is actually cumulative in a way. So if you miss a month, you don't start back at ground zero. So
Mm.
every meditation that you do is adding to your muscle.
Yep. Yep.
It's not one of those muscles that if you don't use it, you lose it. You do a
Mm.
little bit, but it's still there and it comes back really quickly.
Muscle
So
memory. Yep.
it is, you get muscle memory around that meditation. And so that whole being able to be present is something that I can definitely do. And so that doing a lot of meditations and things through that, I felt that I had a compelling future. So this is back when I was deciding to go off the medication. I felt that I had a compelling future. And I felt that through my meditations and stuff, I was able to be joyful enough and present enough that I could try, give up, go wean myself off it and see how it went. And I put structures around myself, in that sorry, the kids are now coming in from school. But I put I put structures around myself to make sure that people would notice if I went off track. So my mum obviously was one, but then I had friends around me in New Zealand and stuff that I also said, look, if I stop contacting you and stuff, can you please contact me, because I'm going to go off this medication.
Mm.
So I didn't
Yep.
just go off it one
You put some
day.
guardrails to help you.
Yeah, to
Mm.
make sure. And I did go off it then, and yeah, haven't had to be back on it at all, even through
Mm.
all of these different challenges. Yeah, it's I've been able to use a whole lot of tools
Mm.
instead, including things like making sure that I make me time, and having time that's filling up my cup. And so when people often talk about me time, they talk about, oh, you should just go get your nails done or whatever it might be. And for me, that's not what I mean by me time. for me time, I mean something that actually helps you reconnect with who you are, not as a mum, but as a human being,
Person.
as a
Yep.
person. And so often the things that I find people do for me time that helps them reconnect to who they are, they tend to be things that are either creative. So it might be that you garden, or that you quilt, or that you paint, which is what I do. Or they tend to be things that are active. So it might be that they're a runner and they go running, or they do yoga, or whatever it might be. But it needs to be an activity that fills your cup to remind you who you are as a person, as opposed to just get a massage
Yep.
so that you're physically okay. There is nothing wrong with getting a massage. In fact, I love getting a massage, but it's not my me time.
Yep.
It's not reconnecting with me as a being, that I get to exist as a person with my own purpose and my own, just being.
Yep. Awesome. And you do this through your painting, as you mentioned before, and
And
in
running.
particular, Indigo Studio New Zealand. Can you
Yeah.
tell us a little bit more about that part of your life?
Yeah, so that was one of the businesses that I had going for a little while. Through post lockdown and stuff, it was a case of, right, I just really need to get back into my creation and my art,
Something. Yeah, do
into
something.
something.
It's really funny. A lot of people got really creative during the lockdown.
That's it.
A
Yeah.
lot of,
So
yeah,
mine was post lockdown, because my lockdown was particularly traumatic, because like, to the point that because we didn't have any, like, anything open. So the supermarket, you had to wait in a queue for, an hour or whatever to get in, and the supermarket was the only thing that was open. So there was no, takeaway, there was no restaurants, there was no McDonald's, there was no nothing. For about 2 months, and 2 or 3 months. And my husband was working full time from home, and I was trying to keep my business afloat, and my kids were home, and the school wasn't ready. And one of the kids was actually hadn't started school yet. And so I was looking after them, and I was trapped because we couldn't go any distance from our house, particularly other than walk the dog, etc. And I was borderline getting PTSD back from the days of after my second child. So my lockdown for COVID was my main memory is just, again, feeling trapped. But then I remember by the end, I would find by 4 o'clock in the afternoon that I had to get away from my dog, from my kids, and so I would get a G&T, a gin and tonic, and go and hide in the bushes in the garden, because I was just like, I can't deal with another person. Like, you just need to leave me. And I drank too much. I don't even drink now practically at all, if ever. But at the time I was drinking way too
yeah.
much. I wasn't exercising. It was, yeah. So I had a similar experience to a lot of people, unfortunately. And feeling very isolated. But after it, one of my ways of healing, and one of my ways of really getting out of that, was to do Indigo Studio, which has, I've created quite a few things in. Lately, I've been not doing it as much through Indigo Studio. Lately, I have been still creating in my Sunday time slot where I do my me time. For me, I do still paint, but I'm not doing it as much in terms of growing Indigo Studio. So now my creation for work tends to be working through with Sajer Group, where I'm doing a whole lot of coaching with women and workshops with teams to help them be high-performing teams, but then also coaching and creating online group coaching programs for Sajer, where I'm really helping women create the life that they love, so I'm creating a product and relationships to be able to help the women create what they want to do, design and create what they want to do. And that's been like, that's so much fun. Like that's where I'm really enjoying things at the moment. But it took a bit of time and healing through that Indigo Studio creation process to get my mojo back, and to get my headspace in the right space, and to just digest everything that had happened, and heal a lot of the scars, I suppose. There are many of us that, so some people had good experiences and enjoyed the slowdown of life, and others who had young kids in lockdown do definitely have some PTSD from that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, they say extroverts really took it hard during lockdown and introverts
Yeah.
really thrived, except
Yeah.
those with kids.
Yes.
There was no running away from them.
No, no.
Okay, so let's talk about Sajer. How did you come about with the name?
So Sager is wiser, effectively.
Ah, I see.
It's just misspelt. So
Yeah.
right, it's Sajer. And
Yeah.
the idea is that there is no right way to live or wrong way to live. There's just wiser ways, and there's wiser ways for each person. And so, what we're about is using all of the latest, neuroscience that there is, because there's so much research going into how our brains work these days, and all of these tools that people are out there using to try and help you create a life that you love. And so the idea is that there are wiser solutions for you than available. And so it's about just equipping you with a toolbox full of tools that you can pick and choose and try different things. Because anytime that someone says, "Oh, just do this one program or just do this one, type of meditation or anything," that's the time that that they're trying to sort of sell it to you in a way. Because for some people that'll work and for other people it won't. And it's all about, depends on what your experience in life has been, the lens through which you look at life. It'll depend on where you're at life. It'll depend where your kids are at, in terms of, if you had told me half the stuff I do now when my kids were 3 and 1, I would have just thrown you out of the door, right? Like, different things work at different times for people.
Mm,
And so at Sager, we're never about prescribing what someone should do. We're about going, here is so much information, and we're going to help you decipher it and help you figure out what's a wiser choice for you.
mm,
Um, and so that's what our group coaching sessions do. And just a lot of what our uh, one-to-one coaching does. It's mainly me, though I do also have a couple of coaches that contract to me and things as well. So yeah, just looking at growing under that description.
mm. Nice. What are, if there is one thing that you could recommend each mom through the kids' life stages? So, for example, maybe preschool and then primary school age, high school age, university and beyond. Out of those four stages, if you could recommend one thing that might work within each life stages for the kids, what would that be?
So one for all four, or one for each of the
Correct.
four? Okay, one
One
for all
for each
four.
of the four.
Oh,
No,
one
one
for
for
each of
each of the four.
the four.
Yeah.
So for the preschool, I would say, to the mum, I would say the wisest piece of advice that someone said to me is that the days feel like decades and the decades go in the blink of an eye, or some variation on that. In that, I heard it and I thought, yep, I'm sure that's true, but I didn't take it to heart. And I
Mm,
now look at back and I go, I've been a mum for over a decade. And where the heck did that decade go? Like,
mm,
it was so quick. And yet those early days when they're preschool, they they felt so long. They did feel like quite the drag
mm,
often. And so what I would say is, don't put off finding out more about what you need to do with the kid at that life. Like, I keep finding out more about, when they before the age of 7, this happens and all the rest of it, like, and I'm like, oh, my kids are past 7. I didn't do that. So it happens really quickly, but I don't want to add more to those mums because they're already feeling overwhelmed. But that piece of advice you can take two ways. So you can take one way as, make sure you use this time and do all the research that you can so that you're doing the right things by your kids as much as you can. But also take it the other way, which is, there's a season for everything. You're in this season at the moment and it will finish. So try and enjoy this season while you're in it. And I hated people telling me that, but it's so true. Try and enjoy the season while you're in it, because when it's gone, it is gone, and it actually goes quicker than you think it will. For primary school, for primary school, oh, for primary school. My piece of advice, and my son has been at primary school for over 6 years and is still in primary school, is it really doesn't matter if they go to school late and wearing the wrong thing. Like, mornings and getting to school and just getting the family happening in the morning has just been such a sore point for us for 6 years. And we've never succeeded in having more than 2 successful days in a row, I don't think, without yelling and screaming or, all that kind of stuff. And I think if I was to tell myself of 4 years ago, just give up. Like, don't try and have the perfect morning. It's not going to happen. Just accept this is the way it is. It's just going to be chaos, and the kids are going to have natural consequences where they're late or they don't have their lunchbox with them, and make them suffer. Not when they're 5, but by the time they're 9, they should be able to remember their lunchbox and their water bottle. And they shouldn't walk the whole way home in their swimmers without their school uniform on and not realize that that's what they've done and that they've lost their school uniform for the first time. It's just the way it's going to be. So stop fighting it, I think, would be my advice. Just go with the flow. And when it comes to high school, we're just venturing into that. And the
hormones and everything, right?
The hormones,
you're getting that from your
definitely,
oldest.
Definitely. It really is a case of they almost go back to the 2-year-old state of mind. It's like after they're 2, they start growing their prefrontal cortex, and you start being able to reason with them, and you start being able to have conversations with them. But it's almost like when they go back into hormones, you lose that again. They lose all sense of perspective, and they supersize everything, and the world is ending, and
like the Terrible 2.
It is. It's almost like that, right?
Yeah.
But in some ways, because you expect to be able to reason with them, it's almost worse. So it's a matter of my husband and I are very much going through the stage of going, he's just in a red brain zone. Like, we've got to walk away. Don't try and reason with him. And we've got to keep reminding each other when we're the one that's in it at the time, going, what?
Yeah. Disengage.
Oh, leave. None of this is working. He is gone. He's just not there. He's just going to fight everything you say. Like, we literally end up having conversations where he goes, no, the sky is not blue, it is purple. And it's like, no, but it's clearly blue. No, it's purple. And he just doesn't care, because he just does not want to have anything to do with anything you say. He will say that black is white and white is black if you suggest it. So it's you've just got to, again, go with the flow. So I think that would in some ways also be a piece of advice through all of the ages is, you're no longer in control. You have to a certain extent, go with the flow. And this piece of advice works across all of them, is that you are not creating your child. You are facilitating a person who is growing on their own journey. And the times that I've spoken with friends and mums where they've struggled the most and they're the most stressed about their kids is because the kids are not experiencing or doing what they know is the best thing for them. And I know this for myself. And you constantly have to come back to it of, they are their own person. We are there to facilitate, to guard and facilitate them, to protect and facilitate them. But ultimately, it is their journey, and we can't force them to be any particular type of person. So, I remember a friend who was incredible when we were all wearing masks. Her daughter was at a very developmental stage, and she was an early childhood teacher. So she knew that this was really important developmental time for her daughter. And she was super stressed that her daughter was just going to be missing out on all of these interactions, but also super, scared of people because they had masks on and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, I just had to really, she was very stressed. So I had to really calm her down and go, look, you are just facilitating her. You're not responsible for what's outside of your control. You are doing an amazing job with that. But this is part of her journey, and you just have to support her through that. You can't control the world around her, and you can't control her and what she experiences either. So yeah,
Mm.
I think that's probably the piece of advice in that space.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for that. And so, how are you helping really busy mom who are currently in conflict with their professional and personal challenges? I understand that you mentioned before, excuse me, you went back to the way they look at life, their existing beliefs, their current situation, and equip them in sorting out the types of tools that are available that also suit their personalities, their journeys, their objectives. At the moment, are you doing that face to face? Are you doing that virtually? How do people find you?
Sure. So yes, I'm doing it face to face for sure, virtually as well as physically. But I'm also through my, if you go onto my website, which is Sajer.group, or you follow me on Facebook or Instagram, which is Sajer Coach. If you just Google Sajer Coach, um, you can see me on there as well. What I am doing so that I can reach a wider audience and not just be one-to-one with people is I am doing some group coaching programs. And by doing those, there's a group of 6 to 8 people where you end up being able to see some videos that I've done. So you learn some content, and then as a group we get together and apply that to your life. Because often what you find with a lot of these online courses is that people buy them, woohoo, I'm going to change my life. And they watch the first 3 videos and then they never finish it and they never apply and nothing ever changes, right? So that's the story of my life until about 4 or 5 years ago. Like I was just, or, would constantly buy the next thing. And then funnily enough, it didn't change my life because I actually didn't apply it or even finish watching it. So the idea with this group coaching program is that because you've got these other women that you're in a group with, that you get to apply with these other women, where you get to grow your relationships with them and you have some form of accountability. The idea is that that actually does start changing your life a bit
Mm,
more. It becomes more of a habit. It becomes a little bit more ingrained. And it does mean that you question your thinking. So you do question the thoughts that are going through your mind a little bit more than you would if you were just watching a video and set and forget.
yeah.
So I do a few things, like I have a 3-day challenge where the free 3-day challenge, where it's about how do I carve out some me time, the type of me time I was talking about earlier, without feeling guilty. Because every time you say to someone, why don't you just have some time to yourself where you can reconnect with who you are? There's one answer. And that answer is, oh, I just don't have the time. My boss needs this
Yeah.
report. My kids need to be cycled. I just don't have the time. That's too self-indulgent. But the reality is that just like needing to have an oxygen mask on yourself first when you're in a plane, otherwise you'll pass out and then your kid will as well, and you'll both pass out. The reality is making time to have that me time is like putting on your oxygen mask. So
Mhm.
you're never going to have time if you say you're never going to have time. And don't think that getting to that next stage, you're all of a sudden going to find all this time, because you're not. It's not going to happen. It's all about trying to prioritize that me time. So we have this 3-day challenge where you can start doing all of the steps that you need to do to start carving that out without feeling guilty. And part of that is being certain as to why you're doing this me time. Why is it important that you reconnect with who you are as a person? Why is it important that you don't always feel overwhelmed? Why is it important that you sometimes feel like you're a human being again?
Mm,
Yeah, so
that is awesome.
that the links to that and stuff are on my
Yeah.
website as well.
Great. Thank you. One of the lessons that I learned through all of the conversations that I had with the wonderful ladies was one that I had with Ursula Dialabaroli, and she did wake up very early every day, and she would do an exercise regime. She would go on her journal and write and meditate. And I started applying it from this year as
Yeah.
well, actually. So I wake up a bit earlier, go for a run, meditate, and I feel just a lot better
Yeah,
because, again, I would come from a full cup rather than trying to wait. Usually, I would wait until the end of my work and then I'd go on that morning, on that jog.
yeah,
And it feels very different.
yeah.
So, what
Yes, the
was your
timing.
why?
What was my
Yeah,
why?
timing's very different.
Yeah. So my why really was. So there's sort of two different reasons or two different types of reasons why. So for some people, it's uh, so that I definitely feel better and all that kind of stuff. And for some people, it's more, what does it cost if I don't
Mm,
do it? Right.
yep,
And mine was a combination of, I definitely feel better when I do. I feel more human. I'm less crabby. I actually enjoy
yep,
life 100%. But also for me, it was, what is it going to cost me if I don't do this me time? And the reality is that when I don't do the me time, my temper is way shorter with my husband and also my kids. And so, is it going to cost me my family? If I don't take me time, is it actually going to mean that my boys don't want to have anything to do with me because all I do is yell at them? And my husband doesn't actually want to know me because all I do is nag. Like, if
yep,
it's going to cost me that much, then, oh my
yep.
goodness, I have to carve this time out.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. Both the carrot and the stick.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so outside of your morning ritual, are there any other specific ritual that you do with your husband and your boys to make it work amongst all of the chaos that you're currently balancing in your life?
Yeah, so uh my husband does carve out some me time for him, which is him playing the guitar. And he doesn't get to it quite enough, but he does definitely get to it when dinner's on. So he cooks the dinner because I'm coming in late, etc. So he when he's got dinner on and the kids are just chilling in front of the television, finally at the end of the day, he'll go play his guitar, he'll have his time, so that by the time it comes to dinner, he's actually in a good mood. On the weekends, we also try and have either Sunday mornings or Saturday afternoons where we can kind of do that. So he can get off to his bike ride and I can paint or go for my run if I'm going for long runs at the time. And we just try and make sure that we have a couple of hours each weekend where we can actually have concerted time away from the kids doing something that we want to
You
do.
both
And
enjoy. Yep.
yeah. So at the moment, we don't have the luxury of necessarily doing that together very often because one of us is usually with the boys, but that's okay. Sometimes we do, and we can enjoy. Often, what we end up doing is taking the dog for a walk and telling the kids that they have to go on their scooters so they're a long way away so that we can actually just walk and talk without their interruption. And when they come back, they can see from the scowl on my face, no, don't interrupt mommy and daddy. Because I'm like, go away. I want to talk to my husband. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Awesome. I want to go back to that young Carly, not too young, the one that was right in the middle of postnatal blues. If you could give that young Carly one advice, knowing all of the wealth of knowledge that you know now, both as a career coach, personal coach, but also as a mum, what one advice would you give that younger Carly?
There is no silver bullet to your predicament. There's a whole heap of tools that you can do, and structures and people that you need. And this is actually just part of the journey. It is not the end. It's part of your journey. But don't be searching for a silver bullet. Just take each piece of advice, each new tool, just add it to the toolbox and just keep building. You will get out of it, and it won't be as far away as it feels. You will get out of it, but don't pin all your hopes on one thing fixing it. Just really use everything that comes along, and do reach out. Do reach out and ask for that help. But it really, it's all part of the journey. I think in particular when you're feeling dark and heavy, you feel like there's a destination where you'll never feel dark and heavy again. Um, and there is the vast majority of life where you don't feel like that, where you don't feel dark and heavy. But it's not like there's this ultimate destination. It's just another step in the
Yep.
journey. And the highs are just another step in the journey too. So it's, and as cliche as it sounds, it's so true. The highs are only high because the lows are so low. So, like I've had some amazing highs because I appreciate how much they are, because I know how horribly low it can get. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Carly. And one question that I always ask all guests is, do you have an alpha mom song? So when things are going so crazy at work, your boys are really challenging you and you don't feel well yourself, what one song do you play on the back of your mental mind to make it through the day or through the week?
So now, as now that it's come out in the last few years, I probably would play Don't You Worry, Child. And I think
Oh,
it's
yeah.
I had to look up who it was by, because I've just got it on my playlist that I go to when I'm like, right, I need a zhuzh, and it's by Swedish House Mafia. But just don't you worry. There is a bigger plan. And it's all about, and I just get a lot of energy from the beat. That's not the type of music I historically have listened to, but I just get so much energy out of that beat. It's like, yeah, don't worry. This is part of the journey. There's a reason for this. And as trite as it sounds, just the coincidences that come out of the universe. This is part of the journey, and I'm going to have a good part soon because I'm having a crap part now. So it's all good, like
That's a
comes and
nice way to look
goes.
at it.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Okay,
That's right.
awesome. And for all breadwinning moms listening right now, if they could just take one piece of advice, what would that be?
Just think about the words that you use to yourself, because they matter. So if you constantly say to yourself, I don't have enough time, then guess what? You're right. You don't. So if you're just constantly saying to yourself, I'm always feeling so overwhelmed, then you will always feel so overwhelmed. So just watch your thoughts. Watch what you're saying to yourself. Watch what you're thinking, because changing those words is actually a bit tricky, but very powerful. And just watching what is happening can really help you change your experience of life. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, Carly, thank you so much for being here today. And I really hope to see you in person one day.
Yes. Well, I am back over in Australia now that I can get back into New Zealand.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, let me know when you're here next time then.
Yes, that'd be great.
Great. Thanks, Carly. See you then.
Thanks. See ya.
This episode of the Breadwinning Mums was produced by me, Jane Lim, and our theme music was produced by Sam McNally. We recorded this episode on the lens of dark people who have passed their parenting story for generations. We pay our respects to the elders past and present and thank them for caring for country. Connect with us through LinkedIn or Instagram at Breadwinning Mums. Until next time.